morning, folks online. Welcome to the wireless industry panel. We've got one more this session, and then we're going to take off for lunch. First of all, wanted to thank everybody for coming back to Austin. This year, we decided to splurge a little bit and provide some Yeti tumblers. Yeti is actually local to Austin, so we felt like it was a nice touch, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. And you can't tape over it, by the way. You have to proudly display that Kroll logo. We've got, so a little background about Kroll. Kroll, we've been doing this for a number of years, but I like to kind of refresh everybody's memory. Former Duff & Phelps. The company itself is highly diversified. We're 6,000 employees strong. We do financial advisory and risk assessment. And so specifically for telecoms, that can encompass a number of things. If we're doing appraisals for purchase price allocations or goodwill impairments, we do lifing studies for fixed assets. We also do fixed asset advisory. So if you have a big slug of costs on your books that you don't know where it came from, and you need some help kind of dividing it up and sorting it out into subcategories and vintages, we do that line of work as well. And also on the risk assessment side, we do a number of cybersecurity type of services, either subscription or one-off work. So you guys will be getting a packet, I'm sure, in the next couple of days, just kind of describing a little one-pager about what we do. So if you have projects or if any RFIs come your way, don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, we're going to flip through this very quickly. We've got three esteemed colleagues working in the wireless space, and Ian. Sorry, Ian. But we're going to slam through a couple of these. I really wanted to show, first of all, where we're at as far as like a state of the industry. And this is as of Q3 2023. I know we had earnings reports come up, and so we didn't incorporate that in just yet. But here are the wireless carrier revenues for the past 12, 15 months as of November 2023. Just something to point out. Revenues are essentially flat. You're really seeing a 1% change from year to year. So not a lot of growth on the top side. As far as EBITDA goes, you are seeing some increases, and there's a variety of reasons for that. And I think each carrier has their own specific rationales for what's driving that. When it comes to the wireless CapEx, this is really the kind of the big one that I wanted to focus on. Take a look at what's going on here. We had a big spend in 2022. What's going on in 23? Well, we're going to have dial it back. This is a clear indication that the 5G rollout has effectively been completed. Now, there's going to be the next phase. The next round as Rev, what's the latest one? Rev 19? 19. Yeah, so there's going to be iterative events, but as far as like going from the 4G to the 5G bump, it seems like it's largely completed. So we are now, in a 5G world. Subscribers, you are seeing some growth off of that. And you'll notice, I think AT&T Mobility has larger numbers because those are including machine to machine, whereas the other ones are phone only. ARPU, you can actually see there is a bit of a decline going on. I think that's a function of, not only competition, but also it's a cheaper unit cost as you go forward in time because the machines, the electronics are getting cheaper. And so if it's cheaper to maintain, it's also cheaper and you can pass on the savings to the customers insofar as you're competing for, the top line numbers. Again, AT&T Mobility numbers are including machine to machine. But if you, throw those out, then you're really looking at an ARPU similar to what the major carriers are having. MVNO wireless lines, this is interesting. You're seeing most of this growth is occurring with the cable companies. The cable companies are now wireless players, and this is only expected to increase. I mean, look at that change year over year. It's almost 40%. So you expect to see quite a bit going on. There's definitely a lot of questions being asked about, well, why wouldn't I just take this service instead of going with the big carriers? I don't think, the carriers have a good response to that just yet. As far as a major source of competition, it is coming. Okay, we had some discussions about the satellite and LEO. There's really an illustration about what each of the carriers are doing. Apple, obviously being their own, they have the global star circumstances, but each of these carriers has like their own strategy. And I know we had that discussion, but anything more to add, gentlemen, as far as where you see your carrier and if there's been discussions about kind of expanding it, or is this just kind of a niche industry?
Yeah, so for AT&T, I think if you flip to the next one, we've got a little bit of an update that came out last week that we threw in here with AST Space Mobile. So partners, AT&T, Google, and Vodafone are kind of helping them build this out. So our plan for this, they mentioned earlier, a lot around FirstNet and our first responders to be able to help provide that coverage in these very remote areas. You know, Roger gave a great illustration of that earlier, jumping into the middle of the forest in Montana for a fire, trying to put that out and needing coverage. So I think you're going to see some of this coverage come out of it. But it's very early on. You see the progress. The last that we kind of put out there was in 2023 in September. There was the first ever 5G connection with an unmodified smartphone. So basically just a regular smartphone that you would have. The important part to that too, Google is one of those partners. So you see more of the investment on their kind of their operating systems for the phone. So that would eliminate kind of the iPhone at this point for that.
Yeah, let me layer on just a little bit. I know you went back to the previous slide there. So you can see T-Mobile partnered with SpaceX about 1.5 years ago in 2022. They expected some stuff in 2023. It was slightly delayed. We made a press release earlier in January that the Falcon 9, the first one, was sent up, right, delivering those cell sites or those satellites for direct-to-cell satellite launch. And I want to point out one other thing here on this when we talk about it's a global story, right? So this partnership, we have reciprocal roaming agreements, and you can see some of the other carriers that are listed out there, right? KDDI, Japan, we have Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Switzerland, and that's just the beginning of it. So we'll partner with all these other carriers around the world, right? We'll have reciprocal roaming agreements with that. And the other thing to point out, and Roger touched on this earlier today, right, was these satellites are moving, 17,000, 20,000 miles an hour. And you think it's bad with the speed limit in Texas here when he's going out on the weekend driving 110, pulling something behind him, right, and trying to get coverage. It's that much more difficult to have a connection when you're going 17,000 miles an hour trying to connect to a phone. So when we talk about this, we're talking about those dead spaces that were mentioned, right? It's data only. It's a data connection. There's low latency. We don't anticipate that you're going to have, connected voice calls on satellite continuously for any time in the near future, but it's something that we're all going to strive for and try to figure out so we have ubiquitous connection worldwide. And Ian, you got a couple of things you want to?
Roger pointed out on that, I think, when he was talking about the satellites, is that AT&T was pretty far ahead of T-Mobile. I don't know if you caught that part.
For the moment.
So just a couple of nerdy things. So I have Starlink. We have an RV, as Steve said. Last week I was out in the West Texas desert in Big Bend, 130 megabits per second downlink. It's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. The good thing about it is you can turn the service on and off. So I turned it on for January, $120, $150. Turned it off for the rest of the year. We're going away in June, turn it on again. So we'll probably spend $400 or $500 this year on service. Highly worth it. Peace of mind for wife's able to talk to kids, right? Not sitting at campsite watching TV. No. Did we stream a movie actually when it's cold on Sunday night? Yeah, we did. And it works perfectly. What does not work very well, to Steve's point, is those satellites are flying along and the service connects to one and then it hands off to the next one and the next one, the next one. So I've tried doing a Zoom call. Actually, it was with Jim Stegman. I was in Colorado. And I did a call with him and there's like a 5-second pause on the Zoom link every 5-10 minutes type thing. So to your point, getting a voice call here, think of it more as messaging, data, streaming. Can you do a Zoom call? Yeah, you can. You just tell somebody, I'm on a Starlink link. It's going to happen. The other one is the AST number story is really interesting. If you can flip to the next slide. This one, I got a lot of questions on when this announcement came out, because they said they took a 5G cell site and stuffed it up in the air, and they didn't have any modifications to the handset. And it's like, how are they doing that? Because your phone only puts out a certain amount of power, and you're asking it to reach all the way up, a couple hundred miles up, right? How big is that new apartment you're moving into downtown?
1,100 square feet.
Okay. The size of the array, the antenna on that AST satellite is 640 square feet, which is about the size of my first apartment I had in Dallas. So literally what AST has done is take a cell site with a massive antenna array and stuff it up in the sky. If you had a 640 square foot antenna on your local tower, every planning committee in the planet would be after you. Yeah. And B, when the wind blew, the whole thing would fall over, right? So there's some physics going on here. It's very clever. But the fact you don't need that handset modification,
Clever.
huge. Clever.
Ian, thank you, gentlemen. The next topic we've got is wireless architecture. This goes specific to some of the things Roger talked about. We had the discussion a little bit, touched on antenna standardization. We also have some more to discuss on Open RAN. And voice over new radio is something I think we really need to have a discussion on, or VoNR. And then carrier aggregation and spectrum. But let's flip over to the Open RAN, because it touches on some things we were discussing earlier. Is this for you?
Yeah, so Roger touched on this, the announcement we made back in December, AT&T's deal with Ericsson, which is really, from our standpoint, going to accelerate Open RAN. It's a 5-year deal, so it's going to take a while to bring all that Ericsson equipment and replace basically the Nokia equipment that's in the network now. So it's not something that's going to be done overnight, but it's definitely going to accelerate Open RAN. What to expect. They kind of put it out there 2024, 2025. You'll start to see some changes in the network when this will actually kind of get implemented. But I think we're looking forward to it, because as Roger mentioned, there's going to be more software involved in this. You're going to be able to put more pressure on your vendors, because there's going to be more vendors available to work with on this. And then, as Roger pointed out too, a lot more non-taxable parts to the network as we go through this.
Ian, maybe you can weigh in a little bit on this, because I found the idea of the consolidation question fascinating that Mr. Yogo brought up for Roger, in that you have theoretically an Open RAN, but how open is it really if all the consolidation takes place? Is it really just going to be in the hands of a few players again?
Yeah. So the idea with Open RAN was, it was like you could bring any old radio from multiple vendors. What's interesting about this is this announcement is really significant. The Open RAN piece of it, to me, is the least significant bit, because the vendors who've been pushing Open RAN, not Ericsson. Ericsson has been very standoffish, and Nokia has been very standoffish. Nokia participates in some of the standards bodies, but if you ask the other participants how contributory they are, you get a lot of raised eyebrows. I look at this, wireless networks are a big vendor game, right? Nobody ever got fired from buying from IBM. Nobody ever got fired for buying from Ericsson. You can get fired really fast from buying from Airspan or Mavenir or any of the other smaller Open RAN vendors. So Ericsson here is playing integrator to the others and bringing those in. It'll be Ericsson solutions. It won't be Nokia. I can tell you that. So basically, AT&T's gone down to a single vendor, as they've done in other areas like the core. and starting to do that with the BlackRock JV on fiber, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Fujitsu's in there. I actually look at this, one of the most significant there is Dell and Intel, because the equipment this will sit on, these new radios and platforms, are x86 off-the-shelf servers that you and I can go buy from any old IT vendor. There's no difference. They've got their new chipsets are very capable of supporting this level of processing. So instead of standardized wireless equipment, we've got standardized IT and compute equipment here with specialized software. Final thing I'll say is, I used to work for EDS, systems integrator, outsourced, right? Ross Perot. The first thing you do when you want to outsource something is you go to a single vendor. So this deal to me is the first step in AT&T outsourcing its radio RAN equipment to Ericsson. I don't believe you'll ever see the end of this contract. There'll be another contract beforehand. The next carrier to do this, my view, will be T-Mobile. The last one to do it will be Verizon, but they will do it. So that at that point, the carriers are OpEx based, not CapEx based. Somebody else will make the investment. Who's the somebody else that comes in and helps Ericsson do this? BlackRock or one of the big investment shops, like you did with that JV. That JV they did with fiber is the one to look at as the model. Investment, there was last week, BlackRock bought Global Infrastructure Partners for like 12 billion. Yeah. Telecom infrastructure is investable. People want to throw money at it. So, and that addresses all your financial stuff earlier on.
Absolutely. All right, let's hop over to Voner. I know you have some things that you want to talk about, but anything to add about Open RAN?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. I'm just curious, is Dish on the line virtually? Is anybody from Dish on? I'm just curious if they have any comments about their experience from Roger's comments earlier.
No.
Okay.
All right.
Just real quick, Ruben, before we move on. So that's two categories, and I think AT&T's ahead of T-Mobile in both.
We're not keeping score. This is not, a competition.
You might
So,
not be.
Can I mention Dish 1 second? I don't know what Roger said. I had to take a phone call. Dish is really interesting. Open RAN has really not helped them one iota because they haven't sold any phones. At the end of the day, you got to get subscribers. And your numbers you had earlier, their revenues are going exactly the wrong direction. They got some big debt payments coming. I forget the technology. This is a case of sell some phones to people who want to use your service. That's it.
It's clear, that we don't have a topic on this, but I know Dish is clearly facing financial issues. The merger with EchoStar, some people have cited that. Well, that means they're getting into the satellite game. It really is more of a financing play. They need cash like big time. And
So
that's
you
the way to
both
get it.
are head of Dish. Okay, you get one, Steve.
Okay, we've got Voner. Steve, you want to kind of kick us off?
Sure. Let's talk about voice over new radio. I'm not going to read all the stuff on the slide here, but what I can say, and others can chime in, is that voice over new radio is the 5G solution for voice, right? Versus VoLTE. And I will tell you that T-Mobile has led the way in both of these efforts. We were trying to at least push the envelope on trying to get it adopted. And I think we're ahead of the other two carriers on that, but everybody is trying to move forward. Do we have our stuff out there? We tested it in 6 markets. We had it active in 6 markets in March of 23. We plan on getting over 100 million in the next few months. That's old data. I'm not going to talk about anything else. It's not publicly released yet, but we are making great progress to hopefully have voice over new radio nationwide, right, in the few coming months. The one thing I want to talk about, though, is voice gets no respect, right? It's always at the end of the game because these are data networks. And so voice is that afterthought, but everybody still wants to make that call. And in order to have a 5G standalone network where we don't have to worry about any previous legacy networks, you got to have voice integrated into that. And we're working fastly at that. It's a little on the challenging side that I just want to bring up a couple of things that people probably don't think about. You have feature sets. You got to optimize the network. You have regulatory issues. You have to make sure you have E911 connections and it works. And then the other thing is you need handsets, right? So we're always in this transitional issue that we have a customer base that has an LTE handset, doesn't have a 5G handset yet, and the carriers aren't going to go issue 100% handsets at a cost to the carrier. They're going to let the customer upgrade when they're ready to upgrade on their dime, right, to get to that 5G base. So I think those are some of the introductory comments. I'm not AT&T or Ian. You guys have any other comments on Bonar?
So the other thing I'd say is this is nothing new, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It is new, but we've done it before, right? So 3G voice was quote unquote circuit. It was a separate voice channel from data. And then VoLTE came out, voice over LTE, and we could do the jokes because the first versions were like, right? It's all your calls today are on VoLTE. You just don't even know about it, right? 3G is gone. That last point, what other barriers exist to obsolete LTE? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing.
So just phone is it?
It's phone.
Once you get rid of the phone,
once you get rid of the phone,
that network is toast.
Just like Larry's curves, he has his curves going up and down every generation. We're on that curve now to getting rid of LTE probably by 2030. Just like we just got through 3G, and that started in, when was that, early 00s? Yeah, you were still in high school. Yeah, this is natural progression. This is naturally what we do. And my kids do laugh at me when I call them. Like, Dad, why are you calling me? WhatsApp, text me. Dad, you're so old.
I resemble that, by the way. Calling people, it's obsolete. Calling my coworkers that don't want to answer the phone.
I know, they
Text me.
Yeah, these generations don't answer the phone. It's there for a reason.
Good. It is it's a brutal life cycle that wireless lives in. And it seems like, you witness it once and you think, well, how can it be so value destructive? But you can clearly look at history being a case of it's happening all over again. We need to move off of this old network as soon as possible. And what's left to do? Just that. Just get rid of the voice service.
There's a serious point with this as well. This is a serious problem for enterprises and private networks because the carriers, you guys have a natural progression. It's always the new thing. Put in the new stuff, right? We have all these cycles. Ford and GM look at this and go, are you crazy? I want to put a network in for this last 20 years. I'm not going to put a modem into a car that's got a 5-year lifespan on it. That's what happened with 3G, and they had to upgrade for LTE. And all those IoT connections had to be upgraded from 3G to 4G when they obsoleted the 3G network. So this is a serious, for enterprises, they have a problem with this. And there's some management to do within that as to how you support them long term. Right?
Okay, let's keep pushing along here. Our next topic is on carrier aggregation. Steve, you had another couple of items to talk about?
Yeah, on carrier aggregation. So I just wanted to throw a couple slides up here. I guess the fun part of the slide is you can see that you have our holiday card up on this slide. And if you didn't get our holiday card, reach out to me. Dimitri's in the room, Brant's in the room, Brandon's here, right? We'll make sure you get on that list to get our next holiday card. So we like to celebrate in good fashion with a current time, right? This one's happened to be the Barbie movie.
So how do we get removed from that list though?
You don't. You're permanently on it.
Touche.
So what did I want to talk about carrier aggregation? You've heard it before. You've seen a lot of the news. We talk about 2 carrier aggregation, 3, 4, 5. I think even Ingram wanted to talk about some of that too, maybe even 6 carrier aggregation. We just released a 6 carrier test the other day on our live network. We went 6 carrier aggregation, 3.6 gigabit speeds, right? Using sub 6 megahertz spectrum, right? So that's all the stuff we're talking about. For T-Mobile's perspective, it's all 2.5 and below is where we're at, where we're playing in that space. And of course, we worked with our partners, Ericsson and Qualcomm, on that. And the important part was this was on T-Mobile's live production network, right? So it wasn't in a test environment. We're out there pushing at 6-carrier aggregation. What did we do? We took 245 megahertz and aggregated 5 channels together, right? Or 5G channels. We used 2 channels of 2.5, right? 2 channels of PCS and 2 channels of AWS. So I just want to point that out, that it is a big swath of spectrum, 245 megahertz to get that. But that's the way that we're going to help increase those speeds and make sure that we can work on next slicing and everything else to make the network as efficient as possible.
Yeah, and this is where Steve starts to catch up with me on the score. That's why I wanted to introduce this. So spectrum is a challenge with AT&T. We've got a lot of spectrum, but it's a lot of different bands. And so pulling those together so that you don't have the drop calls that Roger talked about, and that you do get the same speeds that you expect from any 5G provider. That's one of the challenges for us. It's additional cost to the network to bring all these bands together. So that is one challenge with our network that we constantly battle.
So a couple of comments on this. Number one, you can download the Barbie movie in 7 seconds. My question is, why would you want to? Dreadful movie. Even my wife and daughter just like, what is this? Miserable movie.
Let me answer that. You're old.
Olgie's like, oh, well, there we go.
Clothing for you.
No, you're right. I wear magenta if I have anything. So 6-carrier ag here, we used to talk about 1, 2-carrier ag and 3-carrier aggregation. The more bands we add in future, when the FCC gets its spectrum licensing authority back, auctioning authority, we're now talking about 6 gig auctions and 12 and 13 gig. So we come back in 2030, we'll be talking about 10 and 12 carrier ag, right? This is not going to stop. Now, what does it mean for the networks? When you start putting 2 channels of 2.5 gig and PCS and AWS and C-band is 3.5, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that means you've got to have an antenna for each one on that tower. You can't have anything without an antenna. Antennas back in the olden days, early LTE 3G, used to last 6 and 7 years, because what would happen is the casings would get corroded by the weather or by bird droppings or squirrels chewing through cables. Today, the average life of an antenna is 18 months to 2 years, because every time you add a band, we have to go add another antenna in that casing. There's not enough room on the tower to put up additional antennas. So what these guys end up doing is pulling down what's there and putting up a new box that's everything incorporated, right? So if you've got 3 or 4 bands here, you've got a very sophisticated antenna. We're going to add to that. So we're going to be continually replacing the antennas. So the life cycle of the antenna is coming down and will continue to come down. The second implication here is you've got to have the antenna in the handset. If you're doing 6-carrier ag, you've got a lot of antennas in the sucker already. You add to this, it's going to be more. So the challenge is for the Samsungs and the Apples of the world to get them all in. But there are implications on the networks. Antennas are not the life cycle comes down.
It's a great point. And to add to that, you've talked about the carriers going out to the sites. I mean, it is pretty common by now to know that usually those sites are touched one every 12 to 18, sometimes as much as, or as little as 24 months. So they're constantly going to those sites and doing something there. But I'll add that there are times that it is such a game to get in there so quickly that sometimes they'll just leave the stuff in place. Yeah. Like there's no time. There's no time to pull it down. And what are you going to do with that box of, 7-year-old, electronics, or 7-year-old antennas? You're not really going to do anything. You can't resell it on the market. It's costing you money to bring it down. So why not just retire it in place?
Because the tower companies will charge you to keep it up there.
It's a rent question.
That's right.
What's the cost benefit?
Those merciful tower companies.
That you guys created by selling all your towers to build your 3G networks. Created the monster yourself, Steve.
We did.
All right, we've got, I think one more slide on spectrum, and then we can just kind of open it up to Q&A. Steve?
No, this just kind of backs up, I think, what we were talking about before, the different bands of spectrum and everything. But I will say, even though we kind of battled that, bringing them all together, we passed with the last earnings, 210 million pops at mid-band 5G. So the rollout is still going well for us on the 5G mid-band. It's just battling, like Ian was saying, you've got to have a little more equipment at some of the sites to be able to bring those bands together.
Let me walk down history lane. Spectrum is the lifeblood of the industry. And if I just turn back the clock 15 years, us, Verizon, AT&T, we're all talking about less than 100 megahertz or about 100 megahertz of spectrum, give or take 20 megahertz, right? And that's what we were functioning on back then. And the last 15 years, we've purchased a whole bunch. And now you can see that this is a nationwide, this may be even a little bit outdated, right? But this just came down from Cohen, maybe March of last year, right? So this should be updated, which is something I could grab quick and easy. And you'll see that Verizon's got, I can't even see that, 290 megahertz, right? AT&T's 285, T-Mobile's 366. And this gets in how we've leapfrogged, right? Our acquisition with Sprint, we leapfrogged our two major competitors. And that big light bar at the top there, you see the 197. This is all the sub-6 stuff. So our spectrum is 2.5 gigahertz. And then most of that other light stuff on AT&T's and Verizon, who's not here, but they can feel free to chime in online, right, is a C-band. A lot of it's at 3.5. And the reason I bring that up is T-Mobile is about 2 years ahead of AT&T and Verizon in deploying 5G. At least that's what we've said publicly, and that's our claim, and we're going to continue to be there as we have 100%, almost 100% of the country covered, right, in our 5G network. And so that's why you see some of the spend going down, right? A lot of it on the T-Mobile front that we spent a lot in 21, 22. AT&T spent more in 22, 23. And so, you know, they're trying to figure out how to get that lit up. But the bottom line message, this is the lifeblood of the industry, and it's not going to stop here.
So I said about carriers selling networks, they would have OpEx, right? And they would basically, you know, the Ericssons of the world run the networks, and the carriers just use them, etc. What does the carrier have as an asset? They have the brand, they have a customer base, and they have spectrum. Spectrum will never, ever be spectrum lifeblood. It's the valuation of the company. It's always what they will buy. So new auction comes along, they will go and borrow $85 billion for the next auction, which sounds crazy when I say it like that. The FCC right now does not have the authority from Congress to to auction any more spectrum. That is a major, major problem. Right now, you cannot have an auction. You cannot sell a piece of spectrum through the FCC. It was a little fight Congress got into. We thought they were going to get it back last year. It didn't happen. They got a 90-day extension, so T-Mobile could do a transaction that had been on the books for a while.
Stuff we paid for a while.
Stuff you paid for, yeah, they paid for. They couldn't get it. So that has happened, but it's only a 90 days. So right now, there are no plans for any new spectrum, which is a major issue. So this is important because now let's look forward. 2024 is an election year. If you're cynical and jaded like me, nothing gets done with the FCC this year. Nothing happens in Congress after the summer. You could argue if anything's getting done now. So the earliest I could see the FCC getting this auction authority back is the beginning of 2025 in a new Congress, if they put their mind to it. Right? It takes 18 months minimum to organize a auction after you have identified the spectrum. So now we're in the middle of 2026. You run the auction. Now you've got to clear that spectrum and give it somebody. It's probably from the DOD. Now you're into 2027 or beginning of 2028 before these guys get any new spectrum. That's 4 years, right? That means the next cycle of big upgrades of equipment for things like 5G Advanced or 6G are at least 4 years away minimum, and it could be 5 and 6 years. And this is huge. So what you have today doesn't stop private transactions, right? So somebody can go buy some dish spectrum, which is probably what's going to happen. They'll need the money. But getting new fallow spectrum from the FCC we've hit a problem here, and it's so real world implications of Congress.
That is one valuable intangible, right? That spectrum. And I want to point out that 366 versus less than 300 from my two major competitors. So good luck changing the game over there.
Well, actually, I'm going to argue with you on their behalf, and Steve's going to smile at me here, is Verizon and AT&T both have the wherewithal in the pockets to go get that dish spectrum, and they push you up right next to you.
For cost.
Yeah.
As you've paid already for yours.
All right. Well, we're getting close. I think we may just open this up to Q&A. Some general discussion here. I know we had you guys had some slides on
Before we do
competition.
that, can we talk about fixed wireless a little bit?
Yes, please.
You want to talk about it? Okay. So the fixed wireless stuff is really, really interesting. And I think it's both good and misunderstood. Using a 5G network fixed wireless, great idea. I tried it at my house, complete disaster, totally useless, took it back. Didn't work.
An early adopter, by the way, in the early stages of figuring out how to fine tune the network.
Yeah, actually, I was marketed to, because I'm an analyst, by one of the carriers who sent me a box and gave me a promotion to try it. My dad has T-Mobile up in Ithaca, New York. Now, my dad is 80. He likes to think he's techie and all this type of stuff. He gets 5 gigahertz confused with 5G. So we confuse Wi-Fi with 5G all the time. We've had this discussion many times. But Ithaca, upstate New York, is a Verizon stronghold, right? T-Mobile came in with new network. Nobody's on the network. You're building a market share. There is a cell site right next to the McDonald's, like half a mile from my parents' house through the trees. And there's an antenna on the 3 sector pointing straight at their house. So he gets the box and he's getting half a gig. I mean, it's phenomenal. I said, Dad, it won't last. As more people use the network, the speeds are going to come down. He said, oh, I've had this problem before with my Honda. I'm not making that mistake again. I'm like, what are you talking about? He bought a Honda. He loves his Honda. He told everybody how good the Honda was. Now everybody's buying Hondas and he can't get it in to have serviced. So my dad is going around not telling anybody about his service on T-Mobile.
I believe
So
they
nobody
call
else buys
They
it.
call that gatekeeping.
Gatekeeping,
Yeah.
yeah. So in the right circumstance, it works very, very well, right? His experience will change. I'm not sure he'll notice the difference between half a gig and 100 meg, seriously. Now, how many houses does that apply to? In our calculation, the maximum number of houses that are addressable by this, because of all the population densities and all that kind of stuff and propagation, is about 30 million, okay? Which is a third of households. Today, we're at 9-10 million last quarter. I think we'll get to 13-14 million pretty quick. After that, it's going to be a little harder. The carriers are not building specific infrastructure for fixed wireless. And what I mean is they build their wireless network, their mobile network, the excess capacity they use for fixed wireless. Okay. So I asked actually T-Mobile's head of fixed wireless, have you built any cell sites purely justified by the fixed wireless network? He said, no, I'm not even in the discussion. I just get told where there's capacity I can sell. And that may not change for a couple more years. So, but it's great service, but we're not for everybody.
It's not for everybody.
Not for
There
everybody.
is a limitation to it, but there has been a strong uptick. And I guess the other thing I'd like to add on is that we're in the broadband business now as a wireless play, right? With fixed wireless access. We have about 4.2 million customers. We've come out and publicly said we could probably do on our network 7 to 8 million. So we've got a glide path to add another, 3-4 million customers. And as you heard earlier, we could probably outpace that. Verizon, who's on? Verizon has a few million fixed wireless access. They've adopted it too, right? And when we talk about this play with the carriers and jokingly, you know, Verizon and AT&T are out front. Millimeter waves, they talk about millimeter is going to be the answer to everything. You don't hear anything about millimeter wave anymore because they didn't have their 3.5 in place, right, to deal with it. So they were focusing on another strategy. So when we look at that in the competition front, my friend here to my right, I'm going to rib a little bit, that they had their earnings call yesterday and they still downplayed it. But what do you call it? You call it Air now, I believe is what it's called. Fixed wireless access is AT&T Air.
Internet Air.
Internet Air. Oh, it's Internet Air is their version of fixed wireless access. So they're actually now recognizing that it is a valuable tool that they can augment some of their fallow spectrum and take on more customers.
Yeah, I'll clean that up for you.
Okay.
And
So it's a different, just quickly, it's just a different strategy on the fixed wireless. So for AT&T's standpoint, we look at it more on the wireline broadband side of we're rolling out fiber everywhere. And we'll talk about that this afternoon. Rolling out more fiber than anybody. So in the areas where we know we're going to roll out fiber, fixed wireless is a good catch product for us to go ahead and move people off of copper, off of DSL, so that we can keep them happy with the fixed wireless. And we know that fiber is coming to their area soon. So we're able to make that a little bit of a transition product and go ahead and start to accelerate some of these people coming off of that copper network that we desperately need to turn down.
And you guys are building out my network, my neighborhood right now. They're about to drill tunnel under my yard this afternoon, actually.
So there's another fixed wireless customer coming over to fiber.
So I'm going to say something here because these guys are always like this. You guys don't realize how lucky you are to have these type of relationships between the operators for these events. And I've seen it before. It happens every year. It happens in July as well. And Ruben and I have, you know, there's been dinners where this happens. When I'm on panels with the carriers, if you get CEOs and CFOs, they won't talk to each other. It's like they won't even acknowledge they exist. Sometimes they won't even turn up if another one carrier is on a panel. So to have this banter here, and this is you're lucky. You guys have always got on like this, I guess, because you're, you know, suffering legal, lawyerly.
We're competitive carriers, right? So we
yeah.
want to be part of the competition. And I guess on that banter side, I'll leave this last note is that just look at the stock prices of all that are out there, even the cable guys, right? Everybody's been down. They've all been hammered, right? Well, maybe there's one exception, but I won't name that carrier that has been doing well, better than the others of late. So
speaking of banter, Steve Ingram, would you mind letting us know? You gave me that number. I wasn't sure what that meant.
Yeah, so when I was talking to Ruben, he was kind of giving me a rundown on Kroll and everything. We talked about cybersecurity, and it got me to thinking which company could use cybersecurity, you know, use those dollars and not invest in their wireless network anymore. And so I looked out there, and it happened to be that I found Steve Yergo's social security number out of their latest data breach. So
feel free to use that as my social security number. Good luck.
Wow, this is good.
I think it's time for lunch. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.